I'm R.A. Schwartz, and along with Rachel Galligan, we welcome you to the Winsidr show where it's all about the W. Today, we are very honored to have a women's basketball legend, Pokey Chatman, join the show to break down the WNBA Semifinals. If you like our show, please consider joining our Patreon community. For less than a cup of coffee a month, you can directly show support for the hard work we do covering the W. And don't forget to see the amazing staff's written content over at winsidr.com. That's winsidr.com. As I said before, we are very, very, very excited to welcome in a legend of every level of women's basketball on every continent of women's basketball. Coach Pokey Chatman. Pokey, how you doing? And welcome to the show.
Man, listen, after that intro, I'm doing great. But no, I really listen. Before you guys get started, thanks for having me on. But I truly appreciate the work that you guys are doing, along with others. But just to really put the women's game in front of so many people in a way that we don't often get. So thank you and kudos for your work.
Well, I appreciate that, and you've got me blushing over here. But I'm curious, how are you holding it down? How's things going with you during this crazy time?
It's crazy for everyone. I don't think I'm any different. It's unfortunate here that that damn virus hit New Orleans pretty early before we could figure things out, and unfortunately lost, some family members to it. Someone just as recent as this past Thursday. So that's been tough. And I'm just hoping that we'll come out of this. It's nice to see that some sports have gotten back into the forefront so we can have some type of normalcy. But I'm holding up fine. Just trying to follow the rules and science and be vigilant and disciplined so we can get through this.
Coach. It's so good to hear your voice. So happy you're with us. I'm excited to jump into some analysis of these semifinals. But first, I want to talk a little bit for those of you who are listening who don't know a lot about Coach Pokey Chatman, but you played, coached, you were at LSU. After that time, you coached extensively overseas. You coached powerhouse Spartak. You've even spent time with the Slovakian national team. You've coached some of the absolute greatest players of the world on some of the absolute biggest stages. I just kind of want to dive into that experience overseas in particular, because I feel like that's an element of you that like we don't get to hear a lot about. Did it start with Spartak, and what was that like? And kind of talk about some of the players that you had an opportunity to coach.
And thank you for that. It was a tremendous experience on every level. And I'll tell you this, how it started. Simone Augustus called me and said, Coach, Tina Thompson wants your cell phone number. Is that okay? Tina was still with the Comets. And so Tina called me a day later, and they were looking for an assistant coach in Spartak because they always had an American assistant on staff. And then fast forward, I joined Spartak, and as you mentioned, I was only the head coach for a couple of years, but I got to coach some of the best players in the world. And my first assignment was to go over 10 days early and train Lauren Jackson. I said, "Are you freaking kidding me? This can't be real life." So that was my first assignment, to go over there and train one of the best players in the world prior to the rest of the team coming into camp and getting started. And that started a string of 6 years, a few championships, learning the game a different way, eventually being able to take some of those trends into the WNBA when I took the Chicago job. But the most important thing was the people, and not just the American players that I was able to coach, but some of the other European players, and especially the Russians, who took me in with open arms, and I had a great 6 year run there.
I mean, the Spartak is a historic team in women's basketball folklore, and we were talking about this before we hit record. But I mean, there's that crazy story that has been. I thought it was a rumor until I finally heard the 30 for 30 with Sue and Diana, where they like went into detail about it. But you were the head coach at the time, and you had a ridiculous lineup of Lauren Jackson, Diana Taurasi, I think Janelle McCarville, and Sue Bird, like an insane lineup. But you have a little interesting story with a connection with Shoptai and kind of what went down that day. And can you just share a little light on that experience?
I do, and at that particular time, Lauren actually was not on the team, and Janelle McCarville was a replacement for her.
Gotcha.
But Lauren was there some great years as well. But yeah, it was just this eerie feeling that day when we got the phone call. I remember exactly where I was in my apartment that Shabtai was murdered, and things happened so fast there. You're numb, and there's only 3 or 4 people you can directly communicate with, so you're in this mad scramble. But my connection to some of the chaos began because I was one of the last 5 people that had spoken to Shabtai. And so some of the, police officers and investigators wanted to speak to me because I was actually trying to get tickets to a Beyonce concert. But just because my number was on that, on his call log, my Russian number, it was, days and weeks of having to endure a little bit of question, nothing extensive, but just the fact that it kept the chaos and the sadness and what do we do now going, because, it was just something that we saw in movies, but this time we were in the damn movie.
Yeah, and I hope this doesn't come off insensitive, but when I heard the story, I had a follow-up question of, did you guys get the Beyonce tickets? I know that like sounds a little bit ridiculous, but
One, that's always the question. Like, did they actually get to go to the concert?
I don't even, I doubt it because I'm pretty sure I would have remembered. In that regard, when I tell you we were numb, because of course so much of what you heard about Shabtai was from his days. He was a Russian spy. He was this. You hear all these things, but we're living there and we see the hospitals, the schools. We know he's financing 2 of the Israeli teams because he loves women's basketball so much. We know he's financing the team Cesta and Dynamo. So we know all these things in terms of how he had evolved to this person who was doing all this great stuff, and that was difficult. But we were in mourning, and a lot of people thought the team was going to fold. I think a lot of people maybe took pay cuts that next year, but it was really difficult situation to see the sadness and hurt because he was really a true inspiration to so many people.
and I know that there was some rumblings of him possibly buying a WNBA team, which I think would have been crazy. But when I think of overseas basketball and Spartak and EuroLeague, I think of the crowds.
Mm.
And can you just talk a little bit about like what the experience is like? I mean, I've been to many WNBA finals games. I've been to many intense WNBA games where the crowd's going wild and down your throat. But as a coach, what was it like to have that experience with the insane crowds that us Americans hear about overseas?
Listen, it was amazing. You look, I got juice as a coach. Even when you would go to opposing places, like first of all, when we were in a small little suburb, Vidnoy, so they would bus people in. Kind of hard to get to. Maybe take you 2.5, 3 hours from the city because of the traffic. But other places, I mean, we would go to Ekaterinburg. That's the team with all the money, the gold. And when I tell you, thousands of people, and they would get there early. They're singing, they're dancing. It was always a show, from ballet to anything you could imagine. It was going on, and of course, the stories of playing in Turkey where they're really, really intense. I remember there was a particular game. Fenerbahce was actually the favorite, and we stole the game from Fenerbahce. And when we were leaving the court, they were telling us make sure you're covered because they may throw some screws at you. So they were throwing things. And look, we were never threatened, but that's how intense it was. And honestly, that was part of what you came to expect. But at the end of the day, they love great basketball. They cheer for their home team, but they love the excitement of sport that it brought to the table.
That's amazing. I wish we could somehow encapsulate that feeling and, share it with, fans and everyone here in the States, because I don't think people quite understand what some of these environments are like. But I do have one question before, I know Ari's got one more before we jump into the analysis of these games. But, I get asked this a lot because I do run a small business surrounding the international game and European style of play. For you and your time overseas and your time coaching at this level, it is a different game. It is a different style. There are major differences, and if you're comparing the way we play here in the States versus in other countries. But how did that challenge you? How did that make you a better coach? And what elements did you kind of learn from the European style?
I think it was less of a challenge. It was more enlightening than anything. I can remember one of my better passers, probably second best passer and third leading assist person, was Ira Osipova, who was a 6'5" post player. And I make that comparison. Or I bring that up because, when they start them out, they don't care if you're 5'2" or 7'2". You're gonna do the same amount of ball handling. You're gonna put
Mhm.
up shots. You're gonna do those things, and that always stuck out with me. And every time we're talking about positionless basketball and not letting the ball stick, which seems to be, you know, uh, uh, not a common thing in our game. That was just how they played. But also, they were just really into the offensive side of the ball. I think what was the toughest part for me was probably not really into the scouting report. Like this, we're not going to watch a lot of video, and I incorporated a good deal, but they were really into the offensive side of the ball. But then one step further, I can remember just watching how a stretch four could really impact the game, and that was a crucial thing for me in drafting Deladon. And of course, she's a great player, but
Of
of
course.
course, everyone had doubts. Oh, she loves Connecticut volleyball. Does she love it? And I'm like, I just needed to love it for 3-4 years. She's amazing. you know,
Yeah.
and that was something. Now we have stretch five, and I'm thinking to myself, that wasn't that long ago. The stretch four was a novelty. And now, with JJ and Steph and these stretch fives and Stewie, I can see our game, kind of meshing with their game. And
Mhm.
of course, I'm a Popovich fan, and I coach Becky Hammond, and I'm close friends with her. So that whole European connection of the chemistry that would come to the table a little early was always evident as well.
And I got to talk about fouls. I mean, I remember watching her from such a young age and thinking, like, this, if I could envision my absolute worst nightmare of someone to go against, it would have been Sylvia Fowles. Thankfully, I never had to play against her, but I remember thinking, like, this would be an absolute nightmare. And I have always loved Fowles. I think
Hmm.
I hope she's feeling better and we can see her kind of in this semifinals. But what's it been like? I mean, you even coached her in Chicago for a while. Talk to us about her a little bit.
Yeah, I coached her at LSU, coached her in Russia, coached her in Chicago. And, Sylvia started playing basketball late. I think she didn't start playing until she was going into her ninth grade year.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Wow.
people talk about, everyone knows she wants to be a mortician and get her license, and she's doing all that work. But I remember here's this 6'5" beast of a player with a soft spoken voice. She loved kids, and she loved to sew and draw. So, look at that big kid, sitting at a sewing machine. I remember Coach Gunner and I went on a visit, and she sewed this pillow and made a drawing, and then she gets to LSU and she dominates, And so then I was fortunate enough to coach her in Russia, and I remember she said, "Pete Chat, you should come to Chicago and coach us." I was Pete Chat then, but it's interesting because we were playing in Czech Republic, and Shabtai comes at halftime of the game, and he says, "Coach," I said, "Yes." He said, "I have a chance to get Candy Parker, or Sylvie, or Sylvie." And I said, "Who do you think we should take? Who's better?" And I said, "Well, Shabs." And I said, "We have Lauren Jackson. We have Diana Taurasi. I think Sylvia's just a good fit for us. It's not about better, but for us right now." And so that's how sometimes players were taken overseas. But so yeah, I was fortunate enough to have her there, then have her in Chicago. And like you, Rachel, I hope she's healthy because no one, you think about how many years she plays, and Sylvia's fast, she's quick, she's powerful, and she's been relatively injury free. So I hope she's able to finish this thing out at 100%.
Yeah, I think we can speak for everybody except for maybe the Seattle Storm. That we're hoping to see her out on the court, and I know that one game she did play. She struggled a little bit, but it's safe to say, I mean, anyone who's been out for that long, you're going to have some rust. But let's jump into these semifinals.
Okay.
Sunday, we did get one game. We were able to see the Sun versus Aces game one. Sun took that fairly easily. I want your initial thoughts. I mean, Jasmine Thomas was phenomenal, but we were kind of talking before the game, like Aryeh and one of our other co-hosts, Ben Dole, kind of said, well, I kind of predict that Connecticut's going to win this. And I went with the Aces, so I was kind of wrong. But what are your thoughts after that first round matchup?
I thought it could have gone either way, and only because you think about the rhythm. You talk about rhythm so much, but we should talk about it a little more. They were playing. Connecticut was in a rhythm. Vegas had the layoff, and it's not that it's an excuse. It's just the facts. You get in the rhythm of playing every other day, and I thought it could be a toss-up. Was I surprised they were plus 20 with Bonner not even in double figures? Yes, but that is the beauty and the fun of this game, and watching these great players who are going to make adjustments, watch these two great coaches who are going to make adjustments. And for me, I'm excited to see who's going to step up next because now it's the chess match. There are no secrets. They have the play calls, and Connecticut's runs and clear out the side for Thomas, or Vegas in a triangle action and pin downs and pinch posts. There's no secrets. So who's going to execute and who's going to step up in this next moment?
Well, and we talk about DeWanna Bonner. I mean, such a powerhouse in the league within herself, but she struggled a little bit. Did you see anything in particular that the Aces did to make that a little bit, obviously a point of emphasis? But what did they do in particular to make it kind of an off night?
I didn't go back and look at all 12 of her shots, but I'm thinking about her very first shot when she came off the baseline out of bounds and double stagger, and she wasn't really open and clean. And then all of a sudden, she still takes the shot. So it's a contested long two, fadeaway two. But also, they were obviously scheming to not let her get her normal close to 20 shots that she would take because they were playing the screen and roll a little bit different with Jasmine, and Jasmine made them pay. So I think it was a combination of, hey, it wasn't her best night. Also, the way in terms of, how they were sticking close to her and it not getting those looks in transition that she's going to normally get. But DB is going to bounce back, and that's going to be a scary sight.
Don't forget to hit subscribe on Winsidr Daily on your favorite podcast app. And also, don't forget Winsidr.com for all the written content you could ever need covering the WNBA. Patreon.com/Winsidr to become a subscriber and get the Wubble Weekly along with exclusive other content.
And I mean, I have to talk about Jasmine Thomas headed into the game. To me, she's kind of this X factor for the Connecticut Sun. They don't have the same type of depth that Las Vegas has in terms of bench but the production. It's safe to say, at least I think it's going to be very difficult to win a 5-game series with just AT and Bonner scoring. So finding that offensive balance and someone else to really step up. I mean, Jasmine Thomas did more than step up. I mean, she completely went off. What are your thoughts about her play?
Listen, it was crazy. Obviously, Connecticut had shot the ball well all year from deep. And Jazz has been up and down, more down for her than she's normally been. So they made Bill's a great coach. He made a conscious decision. We're going to go under these screens. So they go under. Well, that's an automatic rescreen. So now the 18-footer's a 14-footer. She nails it. And then this is what smart players do. So the next time AT sets the screen, she sets it lower. So now the rescreen is a 12-footer. And that's an experienced team, and that's what Kurt tried to put together. Some people that's been there where I don't need the TV timeout or my timeout or halftime to make an adjustment. They're making those adjustments, and you guys know that. And it was nice to, have Rebecca and everyone calling the game, point that out. But at the end of the day, she got to knock the shot down. But it was 12 foot, it was 15 foot. Then all of a sudden, she's like, hell with this. I'm coming down in transition, putting up threes.
Right.
And then one time she took your baseline left and faded. So rhythm is a beautiful thing. And once she got the rhythm, it was like, okay, 31 points, tremendous. So I'm anxious to see what adjustments both teams make to stop that.
Well, I'm curious. Well, first of all, shout out to Jasmine Thomas because at one point she had like one less point than the whole Aces team had. So it was basically Jasmine Thomas taking on the whole Aces team. And if you're looking just at that box score, but I'm curious when we talk about the Aces, what kind of adjustments can they make? Because me, obviously, I'm not a WNBA head coach, but going into this game, I was in the camp of belief that, you know what, Bonner and AT, they can hurt you, but they're not going to beat you if they're the only ones doing everything. So maybe focus in on the other players. But obviously the focus more so from Bill in game one was to focus in on Bonner. So I'm curious what type of adjustments you think we'll see from the Aces to hopefully pull out a victory in game two.
Well, the adjustment with the screening action is the easiest to make. I think the mental adjustment, Bill's probably going to go in there and say, set a solid screen. I mean, they were blowing up their screens. The screens weren't solid. They weren't waiting on them. Like, I'm so used to Kayla McBride coming off a pin down and curling, catching for a quick jumper, or maybe taking a dribble and floating. Or I'm used to her getting to the point of the screen and the defender cheating and she flares. but I thought Connecticut was a lot more physical, and they were attacking them at the point of the screen. They were blowing up screens, and nothing was clean. A lot of that elbow action. Well, if you don't catch it at the elbow, then there was not many easy elbow touches. So I just thought Connecticut did a very good job of being aggressive, pressuring the basketball, not letting them get clean touches, and no clean action off the screens. So then the first action's kind of then you get to the second action, and the percentages went down on top of the rhythm that they had attained. But I think it's just a matter of look, they're top in pace. I think they got to be top 2 or 3 in pace again this year. So they need to get stops, number one, and then get out and run, loosen some things up, and then go to their MVP and Angel, their former Olympian, get McBride some shots. They'll be fine.
Speaking of MVP, it was Asia Wilson who I believe it was Asia Wilson who came out and said, "Yeah, we kind of needed to get punched in the face. We needed to get beat." And I'm curious to see how the Aces respond. These are two teams that really play bully ball and like can be physical, and those toughness categories are so important for both of these teams. But just your initial thoughts of this, just Las Vegas roster in general. I mean, this is a deep team. They've played extremely well all year. What are your thoughts about the Aces just off the top of your head?
Yeah, I can't speak to them needing to get punched. They're amazing. The number one picks after number one picks, meshed in with some really established players, along with Bill and what he brings to the game. They're going to be ready. They won't be out. The physical nature of the game won't bother them 2 games in a row. They're not going to do anything fancy. They're going to stick to what got them to that last season regular season game with Seattle in the number one seed. I don't think there will be a panic, but you spoke on the depth. That's going to be the key. I think that depth is going to really favor Vegas, and Connecticut's going to have to play really at that high level of someone else stepping up beside their usual, pun intended, aces in the hole.
Well, you mentioned the depth. Sorry, Ari, I just have one more. Does Connecticut have enough in the tank to be able to do this, especially after having to play a first round game, second round game, and now here we are in a series with Las Vegas?
Listen, you always have that question in the back of your head, but then Alyssa Thomas and Dewana Bonner just defies the odds. Like, I think they run on gas.
That's a good.
It's crazy because Alyssa looks like she's gonna pass out, but she never stops. I'm thinking to myself, she's like the Energizer Bunny. She just keeps going and going and going. And I don't think Bonner sweats.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that one right there. And their ability to offensive rebound the basketball is going to be crucial in getting them some of those easy buckets that they're going to need to contend with that depth of Las Vegas.
Well, I like to call Duana Bonner the Slim Reaper because she is deadly from every place on the court. But I'm curious for you. You've been in series I don't know the plural of series is. I'm butchering it, but you don't really have too much time to practice. You don't have a lot of time to make adjustments, but we always hear about these adjustments. So I'm curious, as a coach who's been through it, what is kind of the process of watching the film for coaches and for players, watching the film of game one and trying to activate some of those adjustments for game two and beyond?
What's going to happen? The players are going to watch themselves, right? Because the stage is set, and that's going to help you. They're going to look at the clips of themselves and what they can do better individually on both sides of the basketball. Of course, the coaches are going to have the chess match of how to guard certain screens. Be it the ball screen in the middle with Jazz or pin downs, or the triangle action. But I think the key is going to be, we mentioned earlier, some of those players, especially for Connecticut, if they don't have the depth, who's going to step up next? Will it be Heidelman again? Will Brianne January come out and have a high scoring game along with her defensive prowess? Connecticut's going to have to obviously keep getting those offensive boards to make up for some of that depth. So I think it's going to be 4 or 5 things that they're going to do to close the gap on a lack of depth.
Well, it's going to be an interesting one, and I'm excited for that series. I think that series is going to be a little bit closer, as a shame to my Minnesota friends and family. But let's move on to the Minnesota series with Seattle. We're recording this on Monday, assuming that we are playing game one of the WNBA Semifinals Lynx Storm on Tuesday night. The Minnesota Lynx did just come out with their injury report for that game. Lexi Brown is out with a concussion, and Sylvia Fowles is questionable. But I'm curious for you, Pokey, looking at this game, what are your initial thoughts on Minnesota and what they've been able to do this year when a lot of people kind of wrote them off as a bottom seed and they're top four?
Listen, I don't know who would write Cheryl Reeves off.
Yeah.
That's just not very smart. But also, you look at Sylvia, and she's a multi-time Olympian. She's a champion. But I think obviously the work that Crystal Dangerfield has done when she was inserted into arguably the most difficult position on a team that's a dynasty that has so many new faces, and then to lead that team in scoring, but also be willing to have the ball in her hands at crucial times. But what's going to be interesting is, assuming Sylvia's going to play, is they can't get off to that slow start trying to factor her back into things. That's going to be key. How are they going to play? Because obviously it's a different type of game with Sylvia, different type of actions that are run. You're trying to get her some paint touches. So that's going to be key, that adjustment to having that superstar player back early before Seattle can get out and get into their running game and their offensive flow.
Expand a little more on Dangerfield. I think she was underrated. I'm surprised she went as late as she did in the draft. As someone who has really analyzed these up and coming draft classes, I'm not going to say I thought she would do this, but I definitely thought she was playing some of her best basketball at Connecticut. I thought that's really translated seamlessly to the WNBA, which I really didn't think it would look like this. What Dangerfield's doing is so impressive. But what were your, and don't BS me now, what were your thoughts of Dangerfield coming out of this draft and where she should fall?
Go to my Instagram, and I did this. I did something with Dangerfield and Sabrina Ionescu. That's how good I thought she was going to be.
Wow.
Now, not this early, but look, there's something to be said for a point guard that's played with players who understand the game, playing for Gino, a certain way to play without the ball in your hands, making certain reads. It put her ahead of someone that may have been 2 inches taller or, 15 pounds heavier. Now, I didn't think she would do what she's doing right now, but when she was on that draft board, I'm like, oh my God, Cheryl Reeves is about to pop a bottle of champagne.
Absolutely.
But and honestly, I did a thing with she and Sabrina. I thought she was tremendous for her little engine that could. She's fearless. Don't tell her she's 5'5". Hell, she might not be 5'5". It doesn't matter. She just has she has that salt in her game. She has that steely look in her eye, and she seems ready for the moment, so far ahead of so many other people. So I'm just happy it came into play for her, and it wasn't so much pressure that she couldn't withstand. So I'm excited for that kid, and I'm biased with the point guards, as you know. So I'm here for it. Way to go! Keep the small guard alive, right?
Absolutely, I'm with you on that one, and I thought it was absolutely adorable. It made me, like, it touched my heart. She did that interview following that first playoff win, and she was like damn near in tears. And I thought that just showed so much heart that she brings to the game. We see it out on the floor every day, but then to see it, kind of, no one thought we could do this. It speaks a lot to kind of just her competitiveness and her passion. But back to Minnesota, assuming Seattle's at full strength, assuming we've got, Stewie and Bird, everyone's out there, how can Minnesota steal a few games? How can they push this to 5? Or hell, how can they win this series?
It's going to be tough. And I think you start with this, and Charlotte doesn't have to say it. No one thinks we're going to win. Relax, go out there, have fun. That's going to be number one. And then you revisit what got you to a top 4 seed when people voted you out. Okay, then you focus on what you've done well. And honestly, if Seattle's going to play or not, there's 2 different types of basketball that
Right.
Seattle will have to adjust for. And so you focus on that, because here's what Seattle's going to do. Sue's one of those players. She can miss 5 games and she gets inserted back in, and it's like she never missed one, right?
Right.
So, but I think the third part of that for Minnesota is having, if it's going to be Mo or Shanice or whoever, because I think they're going to throw some different looks at Dangerfield, break her rhythm. Maybe they'll blitz her on the side. Maybe they won't try to weak her because she can go left, but maybe try to give her some different looks, break her rhythm. Because Kloppenberg is an excellent defensive coach, excellent coach overall. So just make sure that she's ready for that moment. And if that moment looks a little murky, that you just help her through it. But I think just going down to not getting the wide open transition threes, take care of the glass, because once Seattle gets in the half court, they're pretty damn good as well. So we just got to really, really tighten your bootstraps, play gritty, and play to your strengths.
Well, I think it would be a fool's errand to say what's the Achilles heel of Seattle and how can Minnesota win this. So I'm going to flip it on its head and say, what makes Seattle so hard to beat? And I know everyone's going to say the names on the roster, but shed some light onto this. Let me peek inside of your elite basketball mind. Why is Seattle one of the most amazing teams in this league?
Well, I think it's because the names on the roster that everyone else is not talking about, because Sue and Stewie didn't play, right?
Hmm.
So let's go back to Sammy, and let's go back to Natasha Howard and Mercedes Russell. You go back to no, Jewel Lloyd. Listen, Jewel Lloyd used to come practice with my Chicago team when she was in 11th grade.
Wow.
So she is amazing. And I saved Clark for last because, yeah, she's getting talked about, but like we appreciate her in the game. But she gives you the ability to swing to a big lineup, switch in multiple positions. It's just that's why it's those players that played remarkable minutes in a year when those two Olympians and superstars weren't there, and they're comfortable, they're confident for every moment. Then on top of that, I love the way they play. The ball would not stick. They're unselfish. The pace is really, really nice. They get five out, pull you away from the basket. That allows someone like a Jewel Lloyd who can run and crash the glass because it's hard to block someone out that's on a 3-point line. So it's that, those other players that make them so great, along with Sue and Stewie, obviously.
Well, shout out to Jewel Lloyd because I don't know if you saw the game against LA when she hit that shot. When I think it was the inbound was at zero point 0.8 seconds, the ball left her hands on the shot with like zero point 0.4 seconds left in the game, which was mind-boggling to hit that. And props to her as a player who has had some up and downs over her first couple seasons, but is really coming into her own and dominating this league in many ways. So I got to tip my cap to Jewel, and that's pretty cool to see. A young player. I think one of the things in women's basketball that has struggled to grow this game is teaching these young players and letting them get up close and personal looks at these WNBA superstars to kind of set the stage for where you could be if you work hard. So I want to tip my cap to you, Pokey, for bringing her in on that and just the education that you've been passing along to the world. So I want to thank you for that, but also thank you for joining our show and taking the time out of your busy day.
Hey, look, it's my pleasure. You guys keep doing what you do. I love it. Keep growing our game. And let's just hope everyone is healthy and we have the rest of the series go 5 games for everyone to see this wonderful game that these women are playing.
I'm with you on that. Well, thank you so much, and we'll let you go. Have a great day.
All right, take care, Cal.